Chief David Midegah has got a lot of passion for his people and some very interesting information about his traditions and their correlation with the Book of Mormon, who he identifies as, and the prophecies that have been told among his people for generations that align very closely with Jewish teachings, as corroborated by several Jews, and certainly going along with the Book of Mormon. Fascinating, fascinating stuff. Now, this episode is brought to you by Scripture Notes, our sponsor. As I am finishing up my book, finally, The Interpreters, this is the tool that I use to search the Scriptures and to research the Scriptures. The AI assistant, Daniel, is a powerful tool to help you learn more about the Scriptures and has been essential for me in doing my research. Try it out by going to scripturenotes.com. Go there now. Here we go. All right, welcome to Cwic Show. My name is Greg Mattson, and I am your host. In this episode, I'm very excited to have with us Chief David Midegah. Chief, welcome to the show.
Nay, means I see your light. That's how I said hello. And thank you for having me on the show. Just out of means of protocol, I want to, speak to my ancestors who I know are with us, and to those to honor those from our community, say it didn't go away. But ginina na na bojo mirio gichi da anindigo jeboy mung adik nanga adik sangab nindu dem and mini wakan nindu jaba. So I hope the Creator's working in your life. I'm the kind man of the Ojibwe peoples. That's what I was named in Lodge. I come from the Great Deer family. It's one of the original principal 7 clans we call Dudamag, which is your responsibility. And I come from my family is buried in a place that we call sacred water of the Creator, spirit water. But if I'm being honest, Greg, so did you, because you were born from your mother's womb, and that sacred water was your first baptism.
Yeah, and I've watched you now over the last 2 or 3 days, well, maybe longer than that, I guess, and you've hit a number of YouTube channels. You've had some popularity here. People love your message and what you're saying and the spirit that you have about you. You've got such an interesting story that what I don't understand is why we don't know about this. I don't get why we don't know about some of these things. Can you address that first of all? Because we'll get into what it is your story is, and
I have lived
the message of really, so many indigenous peoples here in the Americas. But why don't, first of all, Latter-day Saints, Mormons, members of the church know this? And second of all, why do we not have a greater knowledge of these things as a larger American culture?
Genocide. Intentional genocide. These are the things that people need. Where does your passion come from? Well, first of all, when I say traditional, I follow the heart of the mother, my grandmother. And I have LDS grandmother and a tribal grandmother. And I follow both their hearts. And until you are authorized to speak, which a lot of the members of the church should remember when they judge each other, you're not supposed to speak. And just an arrow through the air. If you're not a judge, you're not supposed to judge. And so when I was 39 years old, I was told to speak, and I spoke. Now, I'm in the first generation that's able to do so without feeling the pressures that my father's generation and my grandmother and great-grandparents and great-great, and Americans don't realize that. It was the fall of 1978 when all of the protections from Congress allowed tribal peoples to, one, raise their children, speak your language outside of the reserve, practice your culture and your spiritual identity, to even go to a hospital. You had to go to an Indian hospital where the U.S., and we didn't like to go. The U.S. self-reported from 1960 to 1974, they forcibly sterilized 60% of all Native women under a 1920s law that said they had the right to choose who that could be deemed, to procreate. And so people don't know that from 1883 until 1978, we were under the anti-Indian laws meant to assimilate us. And right in the middle, in 1930, this is why you don't know. We didn't even have voting protection rights till the end, 1968. And we had the right to go and vote and pick leaders in America before we had the right to keep our own children. And they say, why do you got passion? right? I'm the voice for those that couldn't speak to you, but I am you. I'm also a grandson of pioneers. I'm from the Smith. I literally just had a call 2 days ago from the head of the Smith family, 2,500 members. I'm a Smith. You know, when I went to college in Utah, it was Douglas Smith, the son of Joseph F. Smith, that stood up in the ward. He was a bishop, and he said, I got to tell y'all something. This David Taylor here is a Smith. And I said, I'm also, I guess, what you call a Lamanite too. But so that's why they didn't want you to know. They don't want you to know the truth. You don't even know when I say midewiwin. People think, oh, it's a new age thing. We were priests too. We're priests too.
So it's
a lot.
It's a lot because, you know, as I've gone through and I've listened to what you've had to say about your traditions, there's so much that is, and I used this word before, you corrected me a little bit, but it's that compare to the Book of Mormon, right? It's like, look, this is so similar to what you hear in the Book of Mormon. You have traditions that are biblical. You have traditions that are rooted in the Book of Mormon. This is fascinating. You not only have, and this isn't just oral tradition. You've got scrolls. Yeah. You've got written materials that go way back.
That's right, and we use these in the lodge. You know, I was 15 years old when I first went through the Midewiwin Lodge. Now, this is another thing. I'm just going to pause real quick because I got a lot of emails about this, and there's a lot to have to say. But listen, I have a grandfather named Artemis Millet that helped build. He was like the architect that built that Kirtland Temple. I have a grandmother, Martha Smith, who's the cousin of Joseph, who was actually the first member to marry an Indian because of Joseph. She married a descendant of Pocahontas, Hiram Bell Bennett. As a grandfather of mine too. And they were there. And the keys or the authority to be priests were granted by those who had it on the other continent. None of the 12 called here by the resurrected great peacemaker who was in the perfected body, not the man before he was murdered, but in the perfected body, he called people too. He called 3 men that they're still around. And so none of them showed up and gave anything back. So you shouldn't be surprised to find that hidden within our remnant that survived our genocide is things that are similar. We are not reflecting the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon is reflecting us. We have just not been able to share it. And when we did try to share it, just as is occurring with me, there are a lot of attacks. And what's stunning to me is they won't even listen. And so, yeah, I shared one of the scrolls with Brian Nettles as well as Dan over at Latter-day Watch, just because they're really good-hearted people, just so that they wouldn't put us in the camp of those who profess things, but actually can't prove it physically. And so, you know, it's not our responsibility to seek your approval. It's our responsibility to tell you our truth. It's your responsibility to receive it and then to discern with what you've been given, whether it is for you or not. But again, I do want to say that in 1823 is when the genocide began against our people, the real ethnic genocide. And in that 7-year period from 1823 to 1830 is when he received Joseph Smith, cousin of mine, received the information to keep something sacred alive. Right?
Interesting.
Now, at that same time, we went underground, and we nearly disappeared. And so, you know, these are things that people should reflect upon. That these are 2 sticks.
Okay, so I want to go into that. Before I get into that, because I want to go into this 2 sticks thing, will you go a little bit more into the background? What tribe do you represent? What are the origins there? Because people look at, and what is the geography of those tribes?
Yeah. So I am Anishinaabe, and some people call Algonquin, and it's the peoples of the Great Lakes, and from the Great Lakes, literally in Ohio. People are like Ohio. The first treaty signed by the Chippewa, who were Anishinaabe, was in the Treaty of Fort Harmar in Ohio. My grandfather, Chief Puanakam, signed that. Okay, and when I say grandfather, it's not like the one that's like my immediate grandfather, but we use these terms grandmother and grandfather pretty fluidly because we know if they were alive today, they'd say, you are my grandson. Okay. They think 7 generations ahead. That's us. And we were from Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, Northern Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, what you call Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, and this was our people's lands. And so I'm from those people. My specific region that I come from is called Nibinang Aki. It is northern Minnesota and northeastern North Dakota. And just across the border in Lake of the Woods, again, that's just an invisible line they put in 1872, violating a couple other agreements, 1863 Royal Proclamation, as well as the 1789 Treaty of Fort Harmar, as well as the 1794 Jay Treaty. Americans don't know this, but they'll shoot their fireworks off about 1776, and they love their 1789 Constitution. But I'm just saying, our people are more knowledgeable about your history than you are, and I'll stand toe-to-toe with anyone to debate that. It's true. And so I come from there. My family is the Deer family, and we ran the trading routes that went from east to west, as well as from Kaposia, Minnesota, the headwaters of the Mississippi River, north to, and I'm not speaking anything that's not true, Hudson Bay Company records. My grandmothers, 3 of them, they were sisters, and they were principal owners in the XY, the Northwest, and the Hudson Bay Trading Company within the region. But we ran the trading routes that went from Minneapolis all the way up to Winnipeg and Hudson Bay, as well as over from the St. Lawrence up through Quebec up to Hudson Bay. That's one line. The second thing is I represent 2 treaties. My grandfather signed the 1789 treaty representing the United Nations of the Chippewa, Potawatomi, and Ottawa, the same people, 3 brothers long ago, walked west and established a government that was similar to what the great peacemaker gave to the Haudenosaunee you call Iroquois. And they, to ensure that what they had learned sustained generation to generation of all the Algonquin Anishinaabe, they set a structure together that would make sure that the faith and the fire, the trail, and the communication stayed intact. That's where these terms come from. And so we signed that. And then the grandson of Puanakam signed the 1863 Treaty of Old Crossing, which is again referenced with Turtle Mountain in 1892, which is a separate group that we ended up living at because we didn't get our reservation. But their treaty says in an article that specifically for us says, oh yeah, those Red Bear are going to get their reservation too. Never came. And so I represent that as well under a congressional act that recognized us in 1971 following a U.S. Court of Claims case where we were fighting and saying, these people don't speak for us. And then last, my family is buried primarily in Spirit Lake, North Dakota, as well as Turtle Mountain, North Dakota.
Okay. So
that's a lot. But I know
that's a lot. It's a lot. North and northeast kind of areas out there.
And we got there through the St. Lawrence River.
Really?
Yeah.
I was just talking to somebody about that. Now, that's in the oral tradition of your, your tribes?
Yeah, there's many migrations that came in. You know, there's 7 language families that were original to North America. Don't be surprised when you read there's 7 tribes in the Book of Mormon. Language is family. Even when I was with Noeline Villabrun, the matriarch of the Denetah, and also a former Grand National Chief up in the Arctic Circle, she reminded me many times, don't forget that language is how you identify family. And so the first message that Elder Wawati, facing the rock, shared, who inherited his position from his brother Jacob Wawati, who got his position from grandfather William Commanda. These successions matter in authority. That the first story he chose to share with the rabbis after 2 years and then finally sitting with us was that, you know how we got here after the flood. And he said, the first ones that came in, they came after we were all together in a big settlement and we tried to build a mountain to touch the Creator. It was too soon for us to do that. So we changed our languages and we followed the great deer that had set the trails through nature for us long before the flood back into Turtle Island, North America. And then we established ourselves there, and then other peoples came in. Don't be surprised, even the Chickasaw. You know, I know Chief Phil Lane down there. The Chickasaw, there's 5 groups down there. They're the Muskogean language, and they're in 5 groups. They were 5 brothers. You know, they tell their story too. They came across the Pacific Ocean, hit the Mexican area, what you call Yucatan on the western side. And there were people there acting really weird. So they walked north and across the Mississippi, which at that time was like crossing the Red Sea until they found their promised land. Everybody has a story. But for us, that's where it started. Now, my specific family, my Dudamag, was established, and the Middu Lodge was established 2,500 years ago when the people of the Star appeared in the St. Lawrence waterway. and it was frozen over. This is my clan story. It was frozen over, and they were hitting one of the offshoot tributaries that you would call the Lake of Two Mountains now. It's the mouth of the Ottawa that goes into the St. Lawrence. They were frozen there. And the peoples who were there, the Algonquin and Anishinaabe, they circled that little bay, created like a big ring of fire for a month. And I'm telling you my story, our story. And then they finally came off, and they came off with 3 children and a group of elders, and they were in a turtle-shaped boat. And they lifted out of a bag little antlers and put it on their head. Now, that was a sign to us that they knew who we were. So the Anishinaabe immediately, and by the way, Anishinaabe just means good spirits lowered. Okay? We're like Latter-day Saints, but back when in the pre-days. And this was about 600 BC. And they held these things. So they said, oh, they must be in communication with the Deer Clan. The Deer Clan ran all the trading routes. They also ran the communication with other languages. And for them to have the symbol is what kept them alive. If they didn't pull out those horns, they were about to get killed. And so the chief, the Ogima of the Deer family, which is the same title I hold, he came out and made peace. They stayed with us. They taught us the Middu Lodge. They gave us, which means the way of kindness, the heart. They taught us they gave us the symbol of our lodge, which is the 8-pointed star. And you draw it by drawing 2 sticks that are connected in all directions. It's actually 2 stars of David overlapping. And the Jews know that as the symbol of Melchizedek. And they gave us our lodge because the lodge they came from had been destroyed. And they told us initially there are people that might come here. And so these things were carried on and then dwindled away until the great peacemaker arrived. And we know these things by how we track the moon. And this is another topic, but we already knew these things. So that's where, and so they left they had these 3 children. They had a boy and 2 girls that were important. The girls were called women of the star, or star women, and believing that they had a lineal line to the sky woman. And you can Google it. All tribal nations talk about the sky woman, the lady who messed around with the tree and fell through the roots and brought us to the lower world. And we are in a lower world. She's the reason we're all here. And that they're from that bloodline. But don't be surprised. The Jews trace all of their membership in their dudems, their clans, based off matrilineal bloodline too.
Their mother. Mm-hmm.
But my dudum, the Adik Dudem, was one of only 2 that were matrilineal descent because of this moment. The 2 daughters were given to the 2 sons of the Adik Ogima, creating the Moose Dudum, which was the second dudum that is now extinct. The British convinced the clans to murder them, believing they would pass through, and instead they just took over everything. These were big warriors. And then the boy was taken by the elders through each community and established the Middu Lodge. And like I said, a lot of Latter-day Saints are like, what's this new age stuff? Now you might want to pump your brakes. Because before I was ever in the LDS temple, I was in our Middu Lodge, which is written about in the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, where the women and men are sitting on each side, and they're going through the rooms learning about the first mother and father, and they have the same signs and tokens. Don't think we didn't get it from somebody, and don't think we lost it. Hey, no one showed up and conferred those things back. We just were going into a genocide, and yet here we are. We survived. Now, real quick, this title was so significant that even when the Hudson Bay Company came and the French and British were trying to put their trading routes in, that they had to communicate through these matriarchs of these nations. Utinawasis, Tecumseh, Machiquians. This is in the 17th and 1800s. And in each of their names means woman of the star. It was a title of you're that bloodline. That's why when I speak, my grandmother who picked me as her the one representing her, you know, Patricia Breen Brunel the Fountain, and her mother was Mary de Harlay, and her mother was Marie Paul, and her mother was Adelaide Breland, and her mother was Emily Wells, and her mother was Joseph Grant, and her mother was Utinawasis Adik Sangab. Also, my grandmother is her sister, Machiquians Adik Sangab. Utinawasis in Oji Cree means star woman. Machiquians in Ojibwe means star woman. And also Tecumseh, her sister, was the Assiniboine, means star woman. All their lines were merged together. We did the same things the Jews did. Took 3 or 4 generations, merged them together. That's my great-grandma and great-grandpa. And Chief Red Bear was their half-brother. He merged in as well. And so, you know, These are sacred things, and we don't forget it.
Now, David, you're a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Do you then, I mean, it just sounds obvious to me at this point now, but do you identify as a Lamanite then?
Well, who is Laman's father?
Lehi.
There you go.
So you would identify as a Lehite.
Yeah. My son identifies with me. I identify with my father.
Okay.
My father identifies with his father. So, yeah, yes.
Okay. It just makes me wonder, because you talk about language as family, and I think about the way that you are describing tribes and peoples of indigenous peoples in the Americas, and the way that you have the tribes of Israel, right? The 12 tribes of Israel. For example, I mean, in my patriarchal blessing, I'm told that I'm an Ephraimite. And I think to myself, okay, well, do I have the blood of Ephraim, or am I put in with a group of people that are identified with this tribe, right? Is that a similar type of thinking sometimes with what you have with indigenous peoples here? Or is it like it's solid? It is, because the way you're talking, you say, well, there's 3 different brothers, there's 3 different groups, there's breakoffs of this, that, and the other, but we're still kind of one people. I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking there's some type of similarity to the way they talk about the 12 tribes of Israel.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's where they're at. So the Mississauga, it's a name. They're the same people. Their spirit's lowered. Then they're Ojibwe. I can say my tribe is Ojibwe. I'm a spirit in a body, right? And then I can say that I'm recording a vision with the Creator. It's a responsibility. Ojibwe. That's what it means. And these people, they were all Ojibwe, and they had migrated because of a message they got. They had began migrating west, and they stayed in places. So the Ojibwe who stayed at the place where the rivers have many mouths, which you would call Toronto, that name means Mississauga. So when they meet people, I'm from the family, our family that's at Mississauga, right? The place of, it's a location identifier. And then those that are at Nipissing is a lake just north of, which means little sea. It's a little sea just north of that. And then there are those, and so this is what happened. And then you take upon yourself. So when you travel and meet people and they say, where are you from? Like, what an immediate connection. Well, I'm from that place. Okay. But they're all the same people. They just have a responsibility. Now, the 3 brothers, they were different. The 3 brothers had special gifts. They actually walked around the entire world after they set up the 3 Fires Confederacy. And 2 of them learned how to travel to the sky world. One of them remained behind. And there's a story the Iroquois talk about how he showed up and he was begging them to help him die. They actually tell the story about how they opened him up and took all his organs out, trying to help him die. And he didn't die. So they put it back together. And he went and pleaded, prayed, I want to be with my brothers. And they appeared to him coming from the sky world. And they said they showed him how to go there as well. Because they had lost the connection with all those that they loved that had died. And they wanted to be with him. So they were given a secondary gift to be able to travel to see those who had passed on. And that makes me emotional to think about. So when they had traveled over, they had set their families, one family, 3 brothers. I had 3 sons. They're all my children. One of my sons is dead, but he's still alive because we know that that's the gift. And the brother, the little brother, he said, I'll keep the fire to light the way. And on the trail, they were the fire keepers. Potawatomi means fire keepers. They're the ones that stretched from Lake Michigan around the bottom through Illinois and Ohio. You see a remnant of them that are still in Michigan, right? The southern portion. You had another brother, that the middle brother who said, I'll manage the communication because he's right in the middle in Michigan because the lake stretches all around it. Remember, we had freeways. They're called rivers and waterways. And then the other brother said, the older brother said, and I'll remind you to keep the faith. And I'll record the visions. Ojibwe. And he kept the most sacred name. And he went up to Lake Superior. And they called that Anishinaabe Lake. That's the real name of it. It's the lake of all Anishinaabe to go to. And these 3 brothers put this in place and tasked their children. Don't forget your responsibilities to all the others. Because it has to endure. And it still does. even though they broke us up in the 1850s.
So there's, one of your teachings that you have is called, tell me if I'm wrong here, but it's the prophecy of the seven fires.
Yes.
It's just kind of interesting, again, the number 7 that's there. And I think about like the 7 seals of the book of Revelation and et cetera. But can you go over that a little bit? How central is this to you? I know that even there's a belt that was held on to, and is it Commanda? I can't remember.
William Commanda.
Yeah.
I met him when I was 16 years old in California.
Yeah. So he was in charge of this, and he had the belt of this prophecy. I think he died in 2011.
That's right.
But how central is that type of a prophecy to you and to your family?
It's critical. This was a message that was given to us and it means something, because even the Ojibwe that went west are even called the Nez Perce, the Nimipu, where I grew up. They speak Ojibwe, and they are 7 fires prophecy people, and they teach that's how they got there, as well as even the Blackfoot in Montana. They're Ojibwe 7 fires people, all the way stretching. It was critical. We were on the East Coast, and this is many generations after the great peacemaker had left, and we had recongregated. For some reason, humans congregate together in big cities. We had spread out, and then you pull back together. You see this in America. Where's the majority of the people? They're on the coastlines, right? They can win elections just with the coastline cities. And they were back on the East Coast, and a boat appeared, and elders came off. And they said, hey, listen, we didn't forget about you. And we're coming to remind you that they're going to come across from the water. And we're going to tell you the future about what's about to happen to you. And they came to the leaders of the Midewiwin, the star. Why? Because that's who they had come established in the first place. They didn't forget about us. And they came and they told us, we're going to tell you the future. And these things are tough to handle. And there was a big divide about if this is true or not. This is the first story taught in every lodge. Remember who you are. Remember why we're carrying on. Because this 7th fire is going to be lit, which tells us that the dawn is rising and the 8th age will come. The rabbis are waiting for the 8th age too. And we knew the hardship was going to come. That's why when the European arrived, we extended a welcoming hand, because they could come with 2 faces, that of brotherhood, where we would make a mighty nation the world would never know, and we would make peace around the world, or they would come with greed and try to take everything. But the face of brotherhood and greed are very similar. And so we've realized we were within it. We were within the 4th and 5th fire. And then we knew we had to hang on. So we took our sacred scrolls and we hid them. Because when we presented them to the Jesuits in 1642 to 43, they said, you're going to make a new Bible. No, we just have more than you do. What are you talking about? What are you talking about?
That's really interesting. We just have more than you.
It's the most critical thing. That's right.
Yeah, I've heard you also make the comparison that to Latter-day Saints. It's like, look, when Joseph Smith restored the gospel and he brought more of the restoration of truth and et cetera, the Book of Mormon and the new scripture and new doctrines, et cetera. It's like, okay, we're taking what was lost in Christianity and mainstream Christianity. And they're turning and looking at us like, what are you doing? What is this extra stuff? This is paganism. This is whatever else. Right. And you've used the same comparison for what you have to Latter-day Saints.
They restored to a genociding people who had been using the name of Jesus on 5 continents to murder and take things from everybody. They had restored the truth to them. Nothing had been lost from us other than we experienced a very horrific plague from 1612 to 1619, killed 9 out of 10 people. We then, to get away from our cities, which in 70 years were overran with nature, we had gone into the countrysides to survive. In the 1660s, 70s, and 80s, their children came back to take what was theirs. This led to the Beaver Wars. The Europeans were now running the trading routes, and we came back and we pushed them back and said, this is ours. We just only moved away because we were going through disease. And it started a war to where England made the Covenant Chain Agreement. And then we had the 1701 Treaty in Montreal, where they put the belt William Commanda carried, where they write on paper and we produces the beads, which still exists, where it was 3 men holding hands, the French, the Indian, and the English. And we said we would recognize and respect each other upon this land, that we had been here for a long time and had sacred things, right? And they paused and worked with us for another 50 years until they tried again to make us disappear. We never lost what we had. It was just forced at gunpoint in death to go away. And so by the time we hit the 1820s, we're underground. So if he's restoring something, right, and he gets a history from us, no one from that history came and granted anything to him. Those that had given his people which is my people too, from across the land, the authority to speak in the name of Jesus showed up and said, it's you now, fix it. And within our very oppressing people rose another people who were unique and peculiar in that they acted like us and willfully took upon themselves for the next 100 years the same persecutions that we would face as well. But we didn't disappear. And we kept teaching what it is that we do. Now imagine me. I'm 21 years old. I just graduated boot camp. The day I graduated, I'm taken to the San Diego Temple by President Victor Biberston, branch president, and I meet President Clark, who's the temple president of the San Diego Temple, and they take me in and they give me Melchizedek priesthood in the temple, and my temple recommend take me through. And I'm already 5 years prior had gone through our lodge. And imagine me going, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
What do you mean by that?
It's the same.
It's the same.
Now, we could be jerks. And I come like the Latter-day Saints, like you just said. If you tell people around the world, and I'm talking to my people because you are my people, you tell people around, and I'm not a nobody, I come from the Taylor Smith, clothiers, and millets. You tell people around the world, if we add and build upon your faith, then receive it as a good thing. So if we share what we have, when we're able to share it and feel confident that you're not going to treat us disrespectfully, and for you to say, well, I refuse it and reject it, but you still use the history of our ancestors. We could have come in a bad way. We could have come locked arm in arm with our Orthodox Jewish rabbis, with us being the Orthodox traditional midu, and we could have said, you can't speak in our name anymore. We didn't do that. We came and said the fourth law of Noah, the fourth grandfather teaching, says that what one has been given, especially by the Creator, is not another's to take away. You're
talking about the 7 laws of Noah, or the Jewish laws?
Right. It's the 7 grandfather teachings. You're our brothers. Let's sit down by the fire and talk about what we have in common. Because what you call the cornerstone, that you live by faith like an invisible brick, let's make it solid.
Interesting. So here's a question then. Okay, you've got this background, even a temple background, right? You've got doctrines that are so similar to the gospel that you've held on to for generations and generations and generations, that then would only have been restored to us a couple hundred years ago.
The same year we entered our
same year. That's very interesting. Yes. What is, when you look at the prophecy of blossoming like the rose, right? Do you see more and more Indigenous peoples, especially in Turtle Island, right? Do you see more and more people recognizing this? Why don't the Indigenous people recognize more what the Latter-day Saints have and say, hey, this is the same teachings. We've already had this. Why is there not more connection even from that side over to, let's say, the white European Latter-day Saint in North America?
Are you asking why the Indian isn't seeing it?
Yes.
Well, because the church did some bad things. So from 1883 until 1978, again, if you had a child that reached the age of 6 or 7, they came and took them, put them in a boarding school. Now, the religious institutions, the Catholics and the Protestants, they had, for the first half of that, had applied for federal monies and were being paid by the federal government to do this. And they took these children. Now, the church started doing this in the mid-last century as well. And they took 60,000 children paid by the federal government to take them from tribal families under the Indian Placement Program. And they broke families, and they caused mothers and fathers to not see what you had because they saw what you took. And no apologies ever come for that.
Well, was that wasn't done, but that wasn't done under like demand of the government or anything. I thought that was just a program
They applied for the same. They applied exactly the same as the Catholic and Protestant churches did. And they received the authority to do such things. And they took the children and said that your parents are not enough for you. Here's the Book of Mormon. This history is better for you. You can't be with your mother and father. And it caused a divide. A massive one. Okay. But, we shouldn't
I'm sorry. That's something that still lingers today.
It is challenging today. So we are attempting, and I'm one of the few, but I got a loud voice. They listen. My tongue was severed as a child, and yet I can speak. And I can reason in their hearts that you come with love and not hate. That everybody within the church is coming from parents and grandparents that are getting less and less and less genocidal. Why? Because the Spirit is comforting and softening them generation by generation by generation until they could come back to unity with their yellow, black, and red brother. And this is the great gift that was given to the white man who received, what they originally got, that they somehow lost, and what we had carried and how we were. That's how we were when they met us. Don't forget what Christopher Columbus said about the people he had met. Millions, and he wrote a letter to the crowns over there saying we could take everything from them. Came back and did it because we were living the good way, And so that's the challenge. And so, you're not going to listen if all you do is tell somebody standing on one side of the river that you on the other side of the river have nothing to offer. So cross the river, forgetting the river's watering both sides. Focus more on the drop that you have. So when you say blossoming like a rose in the desert, are we not put in deserts? We made that wampum in 1701 that we were going to be equals. And yet the two sides came and took everything from us, forcing us into poverty, and then placed us into the worst places that you could imagine, and then pointed the finger and said, you're so impoverished, you're too impoverished to raise your children. Look at our progress. You're not keeping progress with us, and how could we when you took everything from us? And then use that as a means to justify taking what meant the most, which was our family. You dehumanized our women, not you personally, but they dehumanized our women. We valued the heart of the mother as the direction and how we should treat each other. And what woman who stands by her child who has committed murder is not showing us all how to display unconditional love?
Now, this spirit that you're talking about, as far as what's that?
Yeah, I'm swinging a sharp sword for a reason. The saints have to wake up, show a little respect. You have a responsibility and you have accountability right now. You're not supposed to be both feet in Babylon.
I'm sorry, the last phrase again. What did you say? You're not supposed to be.
You are not supposed to have both. You are not supposed to have both feet in Babylon.
Okay, appreciate that. All right. That prophecy of the seven fires, the seventh one, as you talked about, one of the things, aside from the brotherhood and the face and what they're going to look like, it really is much more, it's very similar to an idea of gathering Israel.
That's right.
Right? It's very much a gathering spirit behind the whole thing. I mean, it's very beautiful, actually. I've read through it. It's a beautiful prophecy, and you go through the whole thing. At the end of it, really the whole meaning of this whole thing is, look, there's going to be problems. There's going to be problems between brothers, so to speak. There's going to be problems between our tribes. But in the end, what's really supposed to happen is a gathering of everyone. And this goes to the idea, to me anyway, this goes to the idea of the two sticks.
That's
and what you talk about of the two sticks. Will you go over that a little bit?
Yeah, so there's two portions there you just mentioned, which was a recap. Well, who are the Jews? Who were they? They were those that went to Mount Sinai. They left Egypt, which was like the breadbasket of the world, the America of that time. They had they built a massive mountain that like shined like the sun on the earth during the day. Like they write about it, like it glowed. And it took them out in the desert, and they had to live day to day, the same as every other animal in creation, under the faith that the Creator is going to take care of you. He took them to just the worst mountain to look at, nothing to love, saying that, hey, the worst of what I've made is better than anything you make, mankind. And he reminded them of who they are, that they are the messengers to the other children of Noah. You say Gentile Jew. It's the same family. It's a family and cousins. And they had a responsibility to remind those that initially were led by the 70 elders. Don't forget the Torah is the grandfather of the Bible, the Quran, and the Book of Mormon. And in there it says after the tower fell that they dispersed to 70 lands. And this is where the 70 elders came from. And that they were supposed to come back together. But the only way to do that is to remember to follow the 7 laws of Noah. Now they asked tons of questions of the Creator, and he answered. And then he said, don't constrain yourself by these. It's in the Torah. And they said, we love you so much, we're going to do it. And he said, well, don't think you're greater than your brother who's following the 7. This is a great responsibility you want to take upon yourself. And so they chose that willfully. But then for a period, they decided to be the brother that inherited the house and said to his other siblings, look what I got and you don't got. And the ADT alarm system was turned off and everything was torn away and taken away a couple times. So what we're talking about in the 7th fire, moving into the 8th age, is one family coming back together and sitting in the circle. One family from all continents sitting together under one creator, one source. That's wisdom. To know that everything you see and everything you don't see has one source, one life-giving Father. That's wisdom. That's the first thing you have to understand. And so that's what we're waiting for. And that's going to happen. And it doesn't happen with war. And it doesn't happen with force. It happens through kindness, because kindness is the power in peace. And we will inspire people to willfully choose to participate in love, in unity, and to choose these things, because a time will come where the divide will become so visible that it's either charred earth or like brotherhood.
Yeah, I think we're pretty close to being there already.
That's why we're talking right now.
Yeah.
That's why we're here.
Yeah, and I think there's no question about that. I think you have to, it's a watershed time, right? It's like you're going to go down one side or the other. That's right. And that's all peoples, right? All peoples will come together on one side, and all peoples will come together on the other side, right? So there is a unity there. I was just thinking about this. You've brought up Turtle Mountain. I know about Turtle Island. It's North America. What is Turtle Mountain?
Yeah, so Turtle Mountain is the center of Turtle Island. We called it Turtle because we walked around it and drew a map, and it looks like a turtle. Like that's what it looks like. And after the flood, it raised from the water like a turtle. It's just what happened. But we were there beforehand. We just, where did it go? And then it came out of the water. Well, that's what happens when water recedes. So the center of that is Turtle Mountain, and that's a sacred place. That's where everything starts. In life, it comes out from there. And so the original peoples of there, that's a stopping place. That's the 8th stopping place on the 7 fires migration. And that's where then food grows on water. It's called wild rice. And this has also been a refuge for a long time. Refuge, what does that mean? Well, the original mixture of the European with our people were with our people, and they called themselves Métis, mixed, French, British, and Scotch. And when the British in the 1860s said, the Crown says, hey, your little colony over there in southern Ontario, it wasn't called Ontario then, your little colony over there is going to be given authority over the whole thing. They came to our people. They were a part of the Nehiawat, which is the Iron Confederacy. Go Google it. It's a 400-year blood relationship, and they were the last ones to be added in. And they came to us and said, hey, you don't understand what they're about to do. Like, they're going to come and take all your stuff. And we said, surely they wouldn't do that. They made these pieces of paper and signed them and said they wouldn't. And they said they will. And they went to war, and we didn't support them. And so they lost. And when they lost, they all fled down into Turtle Mountain. And so when Chief Littleshell and Red Bear came back to Turtle Mountain in the 1870s, they said, who are these people? They outnumbered us 10-1. And this has still caused the divide to today within the community. You got the small Pembina groups. You got the small Littleshell Pembina. Comes from a family, a subfamily. You got a small Red Bear family. That's my family. We're the smallest of all, but we were the ones that held the most authority through the whole thing, like everything. Then you have the much larger Bois Brûlés and Cypress Hills. And then you had the Red Lake, who were over in Minnesota, who kind of just kept to themselves. And They really stuck together, and they did it right, and they're the closest community to our traditional ways that exist in North America. But everything is going to start in Turtle Mountain. If things are going to heal in the whole land for our people, it's going to start there. And this is the year that we're focused on that renewal, rebirth in the a restart in the center.
So it's kind of like the primordial mount in a sense of
right.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And that's in the Ontario area.
It's Turtle Mountain is right in the center. If you look on a map, it looks like a big circle with a line through the middle. It was sacred because one of our great prophets, there's a couple mountains that mean something. There's one over in the center of the Great Lakes in a place called Garden River Ojibwe Nation. And there's a cave called Trap Rock. And we know that this is where a village is buried, but also the first mother and father are buried. And, oh, by the way, we've been trying to tell you a long time, but we stopped telling because you started killing us. Okay. I'm just bold enough to speak it because my feet stood there when I got my council fire rock, the ability to speak, my authority. I just want to share that because some people were posting that someone took it and destroyed it. That's right here. What are you talking about? And but that's a sacred place. But there's also another place where one of our sacred prophets when he had traveled, he's buried there at Spirit Lake, and in the center of an island called Graham's Island, where one of our chiefs, Chief Little Shell, is also buried.
Okay. When you say you have the authority to speak, what does that mean? I mean, do you have? I'm interested. Do you have pushback from Native Americans?
I didn't say it, it's just what's said, but I cut the traditionals cut communities in half. You got to remember 99% of our people, 99%, were forced into Catholic, Protestant, and Mormon groups. And they are not abrogated from responsibility for the families they shattered. And that has to be made right. So, and I'm just saying that very directly, and that's speaking that to my family. But yes, there are those that they don't want to be a part of. They don't know their language. They don't know their culture. They feel that it's a bad thing because it's what they were taught. They're afraid they'll lose what they have, which is literally hanging on to the nipple of a famished cow. They're afraid that what you're doing is going to take something away. And that's because of what occurred in 1920s and 1940s, which we were about to go into. We tried after World War II, and I want to state this because William Commanda and his group made sure that I would say this, that in 1920, all the Indian nations united and they formed the Indian League of Nations, and they sent a letter to Woodrow Wilson and the League of Nations and said, can we be involved? And the United States said no. And then they took away the authority of our traditional and treaty leadership to have any voice in our community. How'd they do that? They put Indian agents with guns in the middle of our reservations. And they passed their laws that tell us who can lead us. And that happened. They caused that divide. If you want any food, stop listening to these people. And they starved people for a decade. And no one denies this. Then in the 1930s, they passed an Indian Reorganization Act, which they wanted to institute blood quantum because they wanted to stop paying their treaty fees, which they were barely paying anyways, but to generationally take it away. Where they said, your child, if you're in the United States, we know communities are spread apart and you can intermarry and your children are still American or Canadian. For us, you may have two Chippewa communities. If they intermarry, you can only pick one community and the child's halved. And oh, by God, if your parent is born north of the border, which for the Chippewa, that's like a dagger in the heart, then they're zeros and their children are called half. It was a war on our ability to even say our child is the same as the mother and father. Okay. We get the 1940s, World War II. And when that was getting over, they said, we're going to reform the United Nations in a different way. Now, believing from the same people, Jules Sioa, William Commanda, Bernard Commanda, out of 200 nations gathered, 200 communities. And they picked them to speak for them. And they said, if they won't recognize us as individual nations, then maybe we can join as one nation, the North American Indian Nation. And they submitted their petition to join as one voice. And the Americans vetoed them and rejected them, even though the majority of those in the United Nations approved it. And then Canada declared them all because they were just across the border. but they say we're different. We're not different. They don't make the determination of that based upon a title from an American Italian explorer named Americus Vespucci. And they called them criminals, and they called them insurgents, and they arrested them. And in 1956, William Commando was given all the wampum belts and the headdress and told to keep going. And he kept going, but now around the world with guys like Chief Phil Lane of the Chickasaw and others, and Chief Tom Stow, who spent his life from the 50s when they dissolved his reservation as recognition and then told him he wasn't an Indian until 2011 when they re-recognized his tribe, and all of a sudden he's an Indian again. You want to know the passion and where it comes from. Racism and genocide is alive and well, and we don't have to choose your canoe to be with you. And so they went around the world organizing hundreds of communities, indigenous around the world, to speak. And now we're coming back and we say, now is the time for us to speak together as one, knowing that a part of us love being American and love being Canadian and want nothing to do with what it is to be an Indian, but want to get the paycheck to be the Indian, which again is minuscule compared to the resources that the United States has reserved a massive wealth on. These are things to consider. Am I equal? I have 582 acres in my father's name. I carry the power of attorney, and I got to get the approval. All of us have to get the approval of a sub-agency, of a secretary on the cabinet of the president. We have a Bureau of Indian Affairs that determines our economic development, if we can build and develop on our very land, if we can sell our land, if we can pass our land to our descendants. We got to get their approval. And we say blossom as a rose. That means give us the right to speak in equity, equality. Give us the same right that you give yourself when you allow your children to marry someone who's from New York, to marry somebody from San Francisco, and they can be fully American with full voting rights. And you tell us they got to be half and one generation more and they can't vote. They press these things upon us and they say, forget about it. You have equal rights as an American citizen, when since 2000, we've lost 100,000 women because you can come onto our reservations and commit crimes and we can't prosecute you when you walk off, murdering and raping women and children. We've lost 100,000. What about my Aunt Cindy and my Aunt Penny in the 80s and 90s? And do I have a right to speak on it? But if we go into your communities off our reserve and we go back on and commit a crime, they come and drag us out and throw us in their jails. Blossoming as a rose is giving us the ability to be humans, to stand as nations, and to give us the respect of that. Thank you for letting me share that.
What is, I've seen that there's a lot of, you've got relationships with rabbinic Jews.
Oh yeah.
How did that develop?
Oh yeah, it's crazy.
And how is that playing out right now? What kind of a relationship do you have with them?
We are going together to all the tribes in the world to share the 7 grandfather teachings, which are the 7 laws of Noah. Remember those 70 elders when they let the Torah tells us we broke into 70 families, 70 languages. We went to, where do you think the Council of Quorum of the 70 comes from? Mm-hmm. Okay, why do you think what their job is? What's their mission? Go read the Torah. So, that back then when they went, what was their laws that they carried? They may have spoken a different thing, but they certainly followed the 7 laws that Noah gave. Also the 7 laws in the oral and written Torah that was given to Adam and Eve, okay, who we call a different name because God said name everything. And then when they said they were done, he said, but I made you too, name yourself. They named themselves. And that's what we called them, but what they called themselves. But so these drops of water, maybe over generations and millennia, maybe 5 or 6 have disappeared. But if one drop of water is found with somebody in a desert, that one drop is worth more than your entire ocean that you own of fresh water. And we'll find it and sew them back together, back to the family. That's what we were doing before I got contacted to speak at this Ojibwe conference. I had no reason to come back to the church. I had intended, maybe way in the future, but my heart was scarred. It was scarred, 10 years ago. And so I stepped away into my other family where I could feel love. I'm doing the same things, right? Maybe they don't respect it. I have authority. Well, who'd you get your authority from? Exactly. Leave me alone. Okay, take it. You want to take things literal? Let's take them literal. Okay, who gave what back? So that's what we're doing. Now, how did I meet him? That's a crazy story. I was asked, I became friends with the International School Network. I was over in Europe, and I was going through custody proceedings to have a relationship with my children. I had a spouse who had made decisions that made it irreparable to continue the relationship. Generally, these things happen when you become pregnant by somebody else's child. And so I was establishing that. And while I was there, my grandmother had coordinated for me to speak to some people. And I did. And then I was asked to speak at the Model United Nations. It's the high school level of the UN. And there was a bunch of schools that came from the US. There was about 1,500 people. And I went up and I unloaded. Okay. I didn't like to talk. They had me standing at Sarah Kupke, who's now the head of curriculum for the international schools, over 500 schools and 40,000 teachers. And Tim Kelly, who's the chairman of that board. These are like father and mother to me. And they had me talk, and I talked. And while I was there, I said, kindness is the power and peace. And we have to start treating each other more kind. So immediately I got contacted by a rabbi from North America who had somehow seen the video. And he said, where'd you learn that from? I said, my people. That's one of our teachings. And then he pulled out the oral Torah. Many forget that just like we do, we have what's written on the scroll, and then we have the oral side of it that is only told in the lodge. Okay? And and it forces you to come into the teaching house. So it's the same you learn in the church. There's you're raising your children up, and they're learning the first level, which is going to help them along the way. But it's not everything. You go into the temple and you receive what used to be taught orally. Now you get to see it in nice video, right? The cinematography, it's really fascinating, right? But again, originally it was orally taught, and these are things to consider. We do the same. They do the exact same. And so they provided this to me, and he went to this story that talked about Avimelech. He's the guy who met Abraham, who met his son, Isaac, and he'd also met Jacob. Not something you see in the Bible. And that's because the Bible was written from 325 to the 1500s from texts of Greeks of what they could find that the Hebrews had. So they didn't get the oral part, right? And in there's more. Like there's like what could be one paragraph in the Bible. It's like a whole 2 pages. And when Avimelech had met Jacob, who would be Israel, and he claimed his wife as his own, he said, I knew your father and grandfather. And I always dwelt with them and they had unnatural success. So I knew God was with them. And so I dwelt with them with kindness, because kindness is the power and peace. And he said, that's what you just said. And I said, yeah, absolutely. Next thing I know, they give me a copy, one of the special ones that they only make for their top, their Rebbes. Okay. And I had to trade a 14-inch eagle feather I got when I got this thing. Okay. When I got this thing, I got this massive eagle feather. I still got one. I also got one at the Okanagan Nation at Chief Lindley's house. So when I go back there, I can speak with authority there. And all those questioning my identity. I'm my father's son, and I fly around with an eagle feather, and I don't go to jail, and it doesn't get taken away from me. So get over yourselves. But because trust me, that's out there too. But and so next thing I know, I'm reading that, and then I get immediately, and I don't know how it happened. I get contacted by a business owner who is a Jewish that is from the Reformed and owns a big company. And they said, hey, we'll employ you while you're overseas. Oh, that's fantastic. And then I'll say, you got to go meet with the head of the Reformed Rabbinical faith. And their top rabbi is a female. Okay. So imagine the dichotomy there, right? The divide there. And so I went to meet them, and so that's how it started. And then unitetheworld.org, which is the global outreach of the real responsibility of the Jews, is not to follow just the 613 mitzvahs. It's to remind all of the Gentiles, the children of Noah and their equal children of Noah, of the responsibility to follow the 7 laws. That's how we're going to get peace on the earth. Everything should stem off of those. Okay. And so I met her. And for a week, made him laugh, also made him angry. I got there in the big building in Boston. It's called Temple of Israel. So I walked around it 7 times, thought it might fall, and then went inside and told her, I said, hey, I walked around your building 7 times so it wouldn't fall. To see if it would fall. She said, why would you do such a thing? I said, because the Temple of Israel is going to be in Jerusalem, not Boston, Massachusetts. And so from that, it led to communication with rabbis in Jerusalem, in Europe. I went to Europe where they actually keep their sacred things. They're actually kept in Stuttgart, and met with them and went through a long vetting process over a 2-year period. Until we hit last fall and they said, okay, it's a done deal. And we're going to meet with the head. You're going to have a conversation with the Jewish Learning Institute, the rabbi there, the head rabbi of the National Committee of Furtherance of Jewish Education, all the main people, the yeshiva, the outreach programs. You're going to go to.
I've taken courses from the JLI.
Oh, yeah. And by the way, they took us into the fanciest room ever. And I was just like, I was a little bit overwhelmed because I thought, you probably could have used this. You could have used the wealth here for more charity, but that's okay. And then those of the rabbinical councils who are responsible to measure the law against your actions. And they signed a piece of paper that said that, and they put our stars side by side. And they affirmed that what we got that came 2,500 years ago, and they explicitly stated it, they will agree to that, okay, came from them.
Really?
And they signed it. The 7 laws of Noah and the 7 grandfather teachings are one of the same, and all should follow them. And they affirm that we received it's on my, they affirm that it's in the video too, the movie, but they affirm that we received these things 2,500 years ago, and that we should all follow these around the world to bring the 8th age, the Messianic age.
So they believe in an 8th age also.
100%. That's their whole belief structure. They're waiting for it. They're waiting for what you would call what the person they're waiting for, okay, is not the person that you're waiting for.
Yeah, the Messiah.
You're waiting for the Messiah. They're waiting for the servant,
mm-hmm.
the one that's going to kick it in. They'll know the Messiah when he shows up. Trust me on that one. So that'll happen. But I'm preparing for that. I'm sitting with them, and at first conversations were just absolute hatred for that. I'm just going to tell you what they said. That bastard kid of a centurion. That's what they believed. And then I shifted it. The greatest Noahide teacher of the Gentiles that's ever existed. What did he tell the Gentile? He went to them first, and what did he say? Love God with all your heart, might, mind, and soul, and treat each other better. Those are the first 3 Noah laws. Okay, he's the greatest Noahide that ever existed. I said, you better show him respect and love. And then what's next hanging you up? Oh, he called himself God. Well, didn't he tell you you're all gods? And you laughed at him, right? Because it's in your scriptures. Well, let's pause for a moment here. And I said this to him too. I said, I could tell you that I am fully God, and you couldn't call me a liar other than to state that my memory begins from when I left the womb, which tells me that I'm not. But what atom in my body and what space between did not come from the Creator and is sustained by the Creator from moment to moment on loan to me. Nothing in me or that I wear is from anything other than the Creator. And he's not here. This is his building he built that we're dwelling within. And I'm walking in a temple, which is why we go into the lodge in the temple to learn to walk in this body, which is a temple, in a good way. And I reminded them of this, and they, okay, you're right. It's okay. They're dialing it down too. I told them just this week, we talk on Friday before Shabbat, that I'm working with the Mormons. When I went to their RRA, the Reformation Revival Alliance, big, huge Christian network, do you think they were upset about that? No. I'm going to remind them of the 7 laws, right? I'm going to remind them of who they are and who we are. I guess I'm going to talk to the Mormons. Did they freak out? No. Good luck, brother. Good luck.
That's fascinating. That's really interesting. Now, finalizing this, you've got, from what I understand, there's meetings coming up this fall of several different nations. You're bringing together history, oral history, scrolls, a bunch of information. What is the purpose of this, and what do you expect from it?
Yeah, so before I ever knew about the September thing, I didn't know about that. That just came about like a month ago. I didn't even know it was about the Mormons. I thought it was like an Ojibwe cultural thing. And I found some Mormons. I said, oh, well, since you're going to be in the headquarters of the Ojibwe, then, I think I can tell you that a couple things that might add to that I can prove are true now. And so, okay, that's great. But we were already planning a gathering of the Midewiwin elders of the lodge stretching across the West Coast. We already had elders down in the Yucatan and in Mexico and in the Munduruku and the Amazon and the Maya and, from all over North America. I was already doing that. I was traveling around and communicating with them about gathering. I even brought a prince from Germany over to be the first crown to come over and sit and get a thrashing from the matriarchs of three big nations, and he took it like a champ. And he didn't even do anything, but he took it. And so we were already bringing everything that's sacred that survived back to the Mi'kmaq nation, back to where we received the seven fires prophecy that told us, we didn't forget about you, but we're going to tell you to go west to see what's left. What's left. And then once we determined what's left, to remind ourselves that now is the time to speak as one voice, right? And we're going to speak as one voice. And that was already happening. This thing a week later in Wisconsin at our headquarters is just like a gift. Because I get to stand there where my grandfathers are buried, where my grandfather, Chief Mama Gazeta, the last one that held it together, carried the same rock as me from the same dudum, was the last unified chief of the great Chippewa Nation that his seat was, and I'll be able to speak to my other family and say, hey, now's the time for you to live up to your responsibilities. Because for us to blossom like a rose means that we have to be able to have brothers to help us.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting. I know that there's a gathering there that we want to look at all the records from Indigenous peoples here in the United States as much as possible, and Canada, et cetera. So that's pretty exciting. I'm very interested to see what comes about from that.
Now we know,
Mm-hmm.
I don't cut you off, but this is important because it's just a plethora of emails. You got to give them to the seers and revelators to translate for you. You got to give them to the colleges to look at them and tell you what they mean. We already know what they mean. We've been carrying generationally what they mean. We know exactly what they mean. We don't need anybody to tell us what they mean. We're going to tell you what they mean. Okay?
Sure.
And so that's the difference. Okay? We don't need anybody to tell you or tell us what they mean. And so we want to make sure that that's understood first and foremost. The ones I was told what they mean. There's a song and a teaching. They can visually look at them, and the second you look at it, you're going to go, wow, that's maybe Joseph wasn't a liar.
Is there, with a lot of what you have there in the scrolls and other things, do a lot of them have an assigned teaching and then an assigned song?
Every single one.
Every single one.
So just like when I was literally the very first non-rabbis taken into their sacred hall in New York, and they took me and Elder Bawadi and Ogeechee Da Jer Pelter, who will be the chairman at Turtle Mountain this fall. It's going to be a blowout, and it's just interesting. The timing's interesting. That they brought out their oldest Torah that hasn't been rewritten. It's on lambskin. They write it on lambskin, literally, and they roll it up like a scroll, and they open. You're supposed to wear your Sunday best, right? But when you speak the words of the Creator, you're supposed to use your best voice, the highest gift you have in speaking, which is song. They sing the Torah. They don't read it. They sing it. Mm-hmm. We sing our scrolls. We sing them, okay? And so there's a song. That's the first layer. And then there's the teaching. That's the second layer. And so that's what we do.
That's really cool.
Now, the good thing is that I'm going to do it as a gift with the four I got because they're important. They're about the first mother and father. And they sat with me and made sure I said, because I spit my tongue off. We didn't talk about my childhood. I can go as long as you want about this. But I can't pronounce things right. And sometimes I got to stop. And I couldn't sing the songs right. So they had me write them down phonetically. And then what it means in English. Now there's a gift there because when I give it to you to look at, you'll be able to say it properly and you'll know what it means in English for the symbols. And what's this mean? No matter where you go around Turtle Island, if you see a scroll or a marking on a stone and you see that image, you know what it says. And you can then put together what it's saying yourself. And then you'll understand how to show proper respect.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and go back to your childhood a little bit, because this is really a big part of who you've become, right? You were kidnapped.
Yeah.
And what was it, 2 or 3 years? You were taken for 2 or 3 years, about the time you got baptized.
Literally right.
Tell us a little bit about that. What's that story?
So I thought I had a tough childhood up to that point. and so the prehistory to that's pretty strange. So I'm like, my mom is like the black sheep, but now that I know her history, I don't blame her. She had some scars placed on her as a 13-year-old kid that she couldn't deal with and nobody wanted to talk about. So, she just hung around bad people. And these bad people, I woke up literally the month after I was baptized, but she let Elder Zwicky and Elder Martin into my life. And at the request of my grandmother. But I immediately knew it was true because of what I knew. And we all know, you hear the truth, you know the truth. So, and you feel the spirit, especially in the darkness that I was dwelling within, this was no cakewalk. I woke up and watched in the middle of the night and watched the body dismembered just outside, just on the other side of my room in the basement. And this
is near your home, or this is after you were taken?
We lived in an unfinished basement. This is literally right before. We were in an unfinished basement, like concrete walls, graffiti everywhere, old mattresses thrown on the floor, and like a sheet for a blanket, and motorcycles parked all in it, and methamphetamines and coming through and kept in the barn out back. People that are horrific that you would never let around, and they're not horrific people. They're scarred people, okay, who gave up on the spirit inside them. They forgot their Ojichagwan, the spirit within. I forgive them.
Where was this at?
This was in Clarkston, Washington. Lewis Clark Valley. Okay, Lewis and Clark Valley, which is literally kitty corner to the Nez Perce Indian Reservation. The only place I ever felt home was out at Nez Perce. And only place where I wasn't called a Mexican by the community. So, yeah, that's how it was then. I remember when the first Jeremy Simons, the first black kid, moved into town, and all the kids in the school tried to beat him up. And I stood with him, and we fought. 5th grade, we fought. But, and we won. But didn't even get kicked out for that because we survived.
Different times.
Kids can be made. Different times. People know the 80s. Hey, rough times. So, woke up one night and heard dripping and sit there and watched people dismembering a body. The very next morning, everybody was gone, and an old Blue Willie's Jeep pulled up. We got thrown in the back and said, "We're never grab what you can hold," and we disappeared. For about half a year, we stayed in I was given a different last name, and we went straight to the West Coast. We lived in these people. I don't even know who they were. I didn't even know how my mom knew who these people were, and stayed in all these different homes all along the West Coast. And then we ended up in a trailer that was moving around through the mountains of the Cascade from Washington down to Oregon. And then my mom was gone. And now we're with these psychotic, drug abusing bikers who could care less about us, and they're sexually assaulting my twin. And I felt called into nature. And the first time I was afraid to move away, but I realized that they realized I couldn't go anywhere. Right? Where am I going to go? So I spent 8 to 10 hours every single day off in nature. I'd come back in the evenings, and they were just glad I wasn't there. And when we had to move, I just did the same thing. They were nice to me because I wasn't in their hair. Right? I was quiet and I was away. Had the most magical experiences in my life. I befriended a bull moose. Like, really? I found a hot spring. And so that happened. That happened. And my relationship with my Creator was amplified. The Holy Spirit, I believed He was with me. It was all I had. And I could never get my twin to come with me. He was afraid. He was living with fear.
No, I don't think you weren't talking at the time.
I had a severe stutter.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't talk for a year, and then I was very quiet because I had a challenge saying things properly. And so I would talk very, very sparingly and not very good. Mm-hmm. And I had a lot of respect for that from the adults. I think that might be why they didn't put more harm on me. Mm. And so while my twin took the brunt of just horrific stuff, I didn't get anything. I don't remember ever getting hit. I watched some horrific things with my brother and my half brother and my half sister that were just shocking to watch. But I followed my friend, the comforter, into nature. And that's where I spent all my time. And I ate in nature, and I show my boys today the same things that I found. And I like I said, I found a hot spring one time. It's the most magical meeting of my life. I found a hot spring bubbling out of the ground, literally like a flat ground, and literally like just bubbling out. And I dug it out and used to go sit there. And then one day a bull moose appeared just before me, standing there. And then the next day, and then for a long time, then he'd leave next day until he was right next to me, until I could touch him. And then I was walking around with him, and I used to go meet him. And it was the hardest thing for me to leave when we had to leave there. You know, that day we went down the dirt road, and all of a sudden my grandparents and the police are there taking us away. And it was hard for me to leave. And I struggled to leave the place that should have been seen as a nightmare, because I saw the heart that you see in your dog or your cat.
Yeah. Your life is very interesting. You've had so many events and you know, adversity, et cetera, to bring you where you're at right now. It's pretty impressive, I'd say. It's and the things you're seeing right now and the relationships you're building, that's got to be pretty exciting, I think. You know, I do a lot of interfaith work, and so I'm working with other Christian denominations. I've got Jewish rabbi friends here in Scottsdale, and friends over at the Church of England, and it's exciting. I love doing that, because that, to me, that's kind of a spirit of gathering in many ways. And so what you're doing here with the Mormons and what you're doing with the Jews, the Reformed Jews, that's great stuff. That is a work of God. It is what it is to me.
Well, the thing that I struggle with is like I used to say when I was pretty aware as a teenager when I was looking in the mirror. My grandma's like, "Oh, you're not as ugly as you could be," right? And so there is what I have seen, especially when I was in the Marine Corps, and you have successes, that there are those that forget what is it that's inspiring your spirit to move forward, and instead of seeing that, they see you. And then it sort of replaces their faith. And so what I try to do is to make sure that the only thing I'm talking about is what my ancestors shared, what the Creator shared, and trying to reflect that, and hoping that the Spirit then, when you hear it, can work in your life. No one can convert anybody. It's the Creator that does that. He does that work. But if you make it all about yourself and look at me, I'm so special and all this nonsense, you know, you have to pause and take a step back and realize that even the spirit that's in the mosquito, right, is held in place equally by the Creator as yours is in your body. And he has a journey too. So give him a drop and let him go on his way, you know, and you're the same as me. It doesn't matter degrees. Listen, I got them. I got the awards, and there was a time I collected ribbons, right? Collected degrees, always 1B+ in my master's. You know, you can look at these things that, oh, I'm smarter than you and I'm this and no. You know, it's nonsense. Every single person, every single human is exactly the same in their relationship with the Creator of all things, regardless if they're aware or they're not, regardless if they're a professing sinner or a professing saint. You're connected, and he's sustaining every atom. He's allowing you to build every thought equally as every other human. And no one has the right to judge each other unless you've been given the right to judge. And if you haven't been given the right to judge, the best thing you could do is be quiet. That's called kindness. And that's what I also wanted to say within the church, is that, you know, when you turn to each other as members and choose to exclude and include, and you use terms like active and inactive, and, you know, first of all, active and inactive based on what? Sitting in a building? You have 6 directions in the house you're sitting in. I walk outside, I'm still in a creation of the Creator of 6 directions. But I remember what's most important within and on the other side. It's not my place to judge people. They're with the Creator just as equally as you are, right? Whether they're doing bad, they're still participating with the Creator. He's still working with them. But too many of us forget that when they see that fruit on the tree and they think it's so beautiful and soft and gentle, and it falls to the earth, has that fall, and they watch as the flesh tears away, and they look and now they see the hard, the ripples and the scars, and it's of no worth. They forget the story of the Good Samaritan, and they're like that priest to say, I guess it deserves what it got. It's unfit, broken branch. And then one day it disappears into the earth, the deep, dark pressures. And aren't we in the earth, in the dark pressures? And something's written in it, and it breaks forth, and it starts growing. And it grows roots that grow in all directions. And then one day it breaks forth. Who are you to tell that seed in the earth? It's never going to break forth. Who are you to say that it's not breaking forth in time for you? It's not your job to say who's worthy and unworthy. It's not your place. You are not a bishop if we're talking about authority. The only ones who are worthy of heaven, because we are lucky to even be loved, are those that can deal equally with the widow, beggar, orphan, and professing sinner, as equally with the brother, wife, child, and professing saint. And we forget these things, but we teach these things, the path of the heart. That when we spoke to the great peacemaker and said, we don't know how to do it, he said, it's in your heart. I don't understand. This is taught in the lodge. He said, where was your heart formed? Remember, it was formed in your mother's womb. From the plants and animals I'm telling you rhythmically now of how I tell it to help my sons learn. From the plants and animals she consumed from this earth from which your ancestors lie, you are their prayers walking in flesh. But your first sound that you heard, Oji Chagwan, spirit in that body, your first experience and memory that will play before the Creator when you meet him is the sound and feeling of your mother's heartbeat. The second one will be realizing that heart is inside you. Walk with the heart of your mother. And if your mother will stand by the murderer with unconditional love, who are you to not do the same? And we have to remember this.
Great final words. Really appreciate Chief David Midegah. I hope I got that right. I think I did. Midegah.
That's right.
And for coming on and spending this much time with us. I would probably love to do this again. In fact, I think we might be meeting soon. Are you going to be at the conference next week?
Yeah, I'm going to be in the conference, and I'm going to come and share one of the scrolls and one of the teachings. And it's significant because it's a message the first man shared when he spoke with his creating father.
Great.
It's one of those messages, and I'm going to let you see it. And when you do, you will really pause when you consider the people that attacked the Book of Abraham.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to it. And I'm looking forward to meeting you as well. Appreciate you coming on, and hopefully we'll be able to bring you back on another time.
Absolutely. And hey, you're in my tribe.
Oh, appreciate it.
You're on Anishinaabe too. Hey, we're together. We're one family. 2 sticks, 1 branch. So
that's awesome. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.